Welcome to Mayhem CEDH, where questionable decks meet questionable pilots. For this week, the Gundam returns, and 3 decks new to the camera join us. Well, one is another Malcolm deck, so I guess Noah's back. With that being said, let's check out the pod today. First, we have Cody on Cazur Ukkima Food Chain, which seeks to assemble a food chain line and win with Ukkima. Evan on Rielle All My Cards, which seeks to land an early Rielle and outdraw its opponents with several wheel effects. Noah on Malcolm Vial Smasher Grixis Pirates, which seeks to leverage powerful advantage and disruption engines, pull ahead, and win with a combo finish. And finally, Jack on Shorikai You Are My Darling, a polymorph deck that seeks to land an early Shorikai, control the board, and win with Hullbreaker Horror. And now, with each pilot in their respective corner of the screen, let us begin. Evan draws and puts a Steam Vents into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts a Mox Amber. Evan passes. Noah draws and plays a Marsh Flats for turn. He casts a Mox Opal. He casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Dark Ritual. He cracks Marsh Flats, paying a life and fetching up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He casts Mana Vault. In response, Cody pays 2 life to cast Mental Misstep, countering Mana Vault. With his turn 1 plans thwarted, Noah passes. Jack draws and plays an Island for turn. He casts a Soul Ring. Jack also passes. Cody draws and plays a Command Tower for turn. He casts Carpet of Flowers. It resolves and Cody moves to his second main phase, adding a green through Carpet. He casts a Mana Vault of his own. Cody passes. Evan draws and casts a Mox Diamond, discarding a land as it enters. He casts Rite of Flame. He casts his commander, Rielle the Everwise. Evan passes. Noah draws and passes. Jack draws and casts a Felwar Stone. He plays an Ancient Tomb. He casts Rhystic Study. In response, Evan casts Pyroblast, countering Rhystic Study. At the end of Jack's turn, Noah casts Brain Freeze, with all copies targeting Evan. Evan mills 12 cards. The turn moves to Cody. Cody draws and adds a black through his Carpet. He casts Culling Ritual. It resolves and Cody adds 4 black and 4 green mana. He casts Praetor's Grasp, targeting Noah. He fetches up a Necro card from Noah's deck face down and shuffles. He casts Necropotence. It resolves, and Cody activates Necropotence, paying 20 life to exile the top 20 cards of his library. Cody moves to his end step and puts all cards exiled through Necropotence into his hand. Cody moves to his discard, or moves to exile, and passes. Evan draws and plays a Homeward Path. He moves to combat and attacks Cody with Rielle. Cody takes it, and Evan passes. Noah draws and casts Reanimate, targeting Evan's Magus of the Moon. It resolves, and Magus enters on Noah's battlefield with Noah losing 2 life. He passes. Jack draws and plays a Mountain for turn. He casts an Azorius Signet. Jack passes. Cody plays a Mox Diamond for turn, discarding a land as it enters. He casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Tireless Provisioner. He casts Mystic Remora. Cody pays 2 life into Necropotence. Cody passes. Evan draws and immediately moves to combat, attacking Cody with Rielle. Cody takes it, and Evan passes. Noah draws and moves to combat. He attacks Cody with Magus of the Moon. Cody takes the hit, and Noah passes the turn. Jack draws and plays a Mountain for turn. He casts his commander, Shorikai, Genesis Engine. Jack passes. Cody plays a Misty Rainforest for turn, attempts to crack it, and is reminded that it's a mountain. He casts Thassa's Oracle. It resolves, and Cody looks at the top 2 cards of his library, bottoming both. Cody passes. Evan draws and immediately moves to combat, attacking Cody with Rielle. Cody blocks with Thassa's Oracle, and Evan passes. Noah draws and moves to combat. He attacks Cody for 2. In response, Cody pays 2 life into Necropotence, killing him. At the end of Noah's turn, Jack activates Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a 1/1 pilot token. The turn moves to Jack. Jack draws and casts Tezzeret, the Seeker. It resolves, and Jack plays a Mountain for turn. He activates Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a 1/1 pilot token. He activates Tezzeret, fetching up a Mana Crypt onto the battlefield. He casts an Arcane Signet. He casts a Skull Clamp. At the end of Jack's turn, Evan casts Firestorm, discarding 4 cards, targeting Tezzeret, Magus of the Moon, Noah, and Jack, drawing 4 cards through Rielle. All targets are dealt 4 damage, Tezzeret and Magus die, and the turn moves to Evan. Evan draws and plays a Cephalid Colosseum. He pays 2 life to cast Cataxian Probe, targeting Noah. He looks at Noah's hand and draws. He casts Narset, Parter of Veils. It resolves, and Evan downticks Narset. He looks at the top 4 cards of his library, revealing a Rhystic Study and putting the rest on the bottom. Evan passes. Noah draws, sighs, and passes. At the beginning of his upkeep, Jack wins his Mana Crypt trigger. He draws and cracks Prismatic Vista, paying a life and fetching up an island onto the battlefield. Jack passes. Evan draws and plays an island for turn. He casts Rhystic Study. It resolves and Evan activates Narset, looking at the top 4, revealing a Frantic Search into his hand and putting the rest on the bottom of his library. He casts Burning Inquiry. In response, Jack casts Delay, not paying for Evan's Rhystic. In response, Evan casts Deflecting Swat, targeting Delay. In response, Jack activates Shorikai, drawing a card, discarding a card, and creating a 1/1 pilot token. Still in response, Jack casts Mana Drain, targeting Deflecting Swat, paying for Evan's Rhystic. Drain counters Swat, and Delay counters Burning Inquiry, which is exiled with 3 time counters. Evan passes. Noah draws, glares at Cody, and passes. At the beginning of his upkeep, Jack loses his Mana Crypt trigger. He draws and adds 3 colorless through Mana Drain. He casts Supreme Verdict, paying for Evan's Rhystic. All creatures are destroyed, and Jack passes. At the beginning of his upkeep, Evan removes a time counter from Burning Inquiry. He draws and plays a Misty Rainforest. He cracks it, paying a life, and fetching up a volcanic island onto the battlefield. He recasts his commander, Rielle, the Everwise. In response, Jack activates Shorikai, drawing a card, discarding a card, and creating a 1/1 pilot token. Rielle resolves, and Evan passes. Noah draws and plays an Exotic Orchard. He casts Gilded Drake. It enters and exchanges control with Rielle. At the end of Noah's turn, Jack casts Dramatic Reversal, untapping all of his non-land permanents. Still at the end step, he activates Shorikai, drawing a card, discarding a card, and creating a 1/1 pilot token. The turn moves to Jack. At the beginning of his upkeep, Jack loses his Mana Crypt trigger. He draws and moves to combat, attacking Narset with the pilot tokens. Evan blocks 1 with Gilded Drake, and Narset is destroyed. In his second main phase, Jack equips a pilot with Skullclamp, killing it and drawing 2 cards. He activates Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a 1/1 pilot token. He casts Whirve Invention, where X equals 4, paying for Evan's Rhystic. He fetches up an Unwinding Clock onto the battlefield. Jack passes. Jack untaps with Evan, who removes a time counter from Burning Inquiry. He draws and activates Homeward Path. Gilded Drake and Rielle return to their owners. He activates Cephalid Coliseum, targeting himself. He draws 3, discards 3, then draws 3 more through Rielle. He casts a Lotus Petal. He casts a Jeweled Lotus. At the end of Evan's turn, Jack activates Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a 1/1 pilot token. The turn moves to Noah. Noah draws and plays a Gemstone Caverns. He casts Windfall, not paying for Evan's Remora. In response, Jack activates Shorikai, drawing 2, discarding 1, and creating a 1/1 pilot token. He casts Miscast, targeting Windfall, paying for Evan's Rhystic. Windfall is countered, and Noah moves to combat, attacking Jack with Gilded Drake. Jack takes it, and Noah passes. At the end of Noah's turn, Evan casts Frantic Search, drawing 2, discarding 2, untapping 3 lands, and drawing 2 through Rielle. The turn moves to Jack. At the beginning of his upkeep, Jack loses his Mana Crypt trigger. He draws and plays a Cephalid Coliseum. Jack equips a pilot with Skullclamp, killing it and drawing 2 cards. He casts Hullbreaker Horror, not paying for Evan's Rhystic. In response, Evan cycles Startling Development, drawing and drawing again through Rielle. Hullbreaker resolves and Jack casts Chrome Mox, not paying for Evan's Rhystic. Hullbreaker triggers, targeting Rhystic Study. In response, Evan casts Cyclonic Rift, targeting Hullbreaker Horror. In response, Jack casts Enlightened Tutor, not paying for Evan's Rhystic. Hullbreaker triggers, targeting Cyclonic Rift. Out of answers, Cyclonic Rift is bounced to Evan's hand, Jack fetches up a Mox Opal onto the top of his library, Rhystic Study is bounced, and Jack chooses not to imprint. Jack activates Shorikai, drawing Mox Opal. Jack presents a loop of casting Mox Opal and Mana Crypt, using Hullbreaker Horror to generate infinite mana with bounce triggers, and then continuously bounce Shorikai to draw the deck. With Blind Obedience and Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, the table sees the writing on the wall, and Jack wins the game. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to catch future videos, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.